Welcome. I'm Sebastian Mahfood, and you're listening to WCAT Radio, the on-air wing of En Route Books and Media, bringing you the dulcet sounds of Catholic wisdom.
This is an encore presentation of Faith and Sport. Tune in to hear Faith and Sport live Monday afternoons from 2 to 3 right here on Carolina Catholic Radio Charlotte, AM 1270. Well, a good Monday afternoon to you, and welcome to Faith and Sport here on the Carolina Catholic Radio Network. We're also streaming live on carolinacatholicradio.org and the Carolina Catholic Radio app. So you've got three ways to tune in to Faith and Sport. And today's show, we've got a great show lined up for you today. So let's go ahead and get into our show and go to our host for Faith and Sport. Every Monday afternoon, Dr. John Acquaviva.
I think, Chris, I'm going to allow that the time that you announced me to the time that we actually go into the show, I'm going to let that go further and further each time because it's such a great song.
Yeah.
Come on, it is. Folks, I'm Dr. John Acquaviva. Thank you for joining us today, however and wherever you are joining us from. As Chris mentioned, there's a bunch of ways to join us for the show, so you're listening right now, but be sure to mention this to friends, especially those who like the Catholic faith as it relates to sport. But in particular, this is a sports show, right? We're the new voice in sports radio, but we take a fresh look at sports through the lens of God and our church. And we like to say it's a 360-degree look because we will regularly include morality, character, and ethics as part of our conversation. Boy, do we have a good show. Chris mentioned this, and he's as excited as I am. Listen to what we're going to do today. We're going to have this week's Hit and Miss with Carlos Herrera. He's going to join us. In fact, he's going to join us long distance, even longer distance. Normally he joins us from Washington. I think he's out west now at a conference, so he's going to mention that. He's been on the show a couple times. He's a certified soccer coach, and he's been involved in the sport for a long time. But he's just going to join us to talk about the Hit and Miss of the week. We're going to do weekend headlines. And the guest of today's show is Moose Muhammad. In fact, you should recognize that name, Carolina Panthers fan. He played in the NFL for 14 years. 12 of those 14 were with the Carolina Panthers. He was outstanding. He's going to join us. He's going to tell us what he's been doing since he retired in 2009 and talk about some other things that relate directly to our listening audience. Toward the end of the show, we're going to do the quick Q&A with Dr. A. Chris is going to shoot me a couple questions, and then we're going to end it all with our Catholic quote of the week. And then, of course, Chris, we have stuff to look forward to, if nothing else, at the end of the show where we get to play that great song again.
That's right. And we also have a special T-shirt giveaway on today's show as well.
That's right, folks. One of the things, being an instructor of exercise science at Wingate University, I've become friends with a lot of the people that coach at Wingate University, friends with the golf coach, the football coach. In fact, Joe Reich, the brother of, if that name sounds familiar, the brother of the Indianapolis Colts brother, Frank Reich. Joe Reich is the head coach at Wingate University, and I think he's on the docket next week. I'll have to check that schedule. And the tennis coach and so forth. And one of the things that they've done for this show is they've donated T-shirts for me to give away.
Wow.
So this week, the shirt it's a gold shirt, and on the front it says Wingate Golf. Chris, you can attest to this. It's a nice, and it doesn't look like
shirt.
And it doesn't look like Dr. Acquaviva has ever worn that, correct?
Nope.
So it's brand new, and folks, we're going to tell you how you can win this shirt. I will send it to you at no cost. Just tell me the answer to the question that I'm going to give after our conversation with Moose Muhammad. Fair enough, Chris?
Fair enough.
All right, so we're going to give that away, so you guys have something to look forward to. I think I'm ready to talk about our Hit and Miss of the week. We have Carlos on the line, correct?
Yes, we do.
Let's bring him on right now, folks. Let's welcome to the show Carlos Herrera, certified soccer coach and longtime friend of mine. Carlos, welcome to the show, buddy.
Hi, Dr. Acquaviva. John, how are you?
I'm doing all right, brother. Now, we talked earlier, and, when you called, you were normally not as energetic as you normally are because you're not in D.C., and that means you are out west, which means you're on a different time zone, aren't you?
I am a different time zone, but I am in Denver, Colorado.
Which is 2 hours, right? It's 2 o'clock
2
here.
hours.
Yeah, got
Absolutely.
it.
Okay.
2
hours behind, but is the site of what I think is the hit of the week.
Okay, and it's one of the hits of the day, brother, is looking out your window and seeing those mountains. It's beautiful in Colorado, isn't it?
Oh, it's absolutely beautiful out here.
And Carlos, no humidity.
I haven't been outside the hotel yet, so absolutely no humidity.
Well, trust me, all you have to do is walk outside the humidity and you're going to say, well, this is what it's like to have no humidity in September. It's wonderful.
Absolutely. There. It's beautiful out here. Everybody's out riding their little scooters.
I know. It is amazing. In fact, you're going to be impressed by this. The longer you stay there, brother, the more you're going to realize just how active that community is. That is the state of Colorado. In fact, believe it or not, well, I shouldn't say that. You would probably believe this. Carlos, Colorado, at last estimate, in fact, they've done research on this, being in the field I am, has the lowest percentage of obese adults in America.
Wow, I should move here then.
In fact, I think a lot of people should move there because the couple times that I've gone out there, it's just impressive on how many people are walking, they're running, they're riding their bikes, they're on a trail, they're climbing a mountain, they're skiing, they're doing something. It's wonderful.
Couldn't disagree with you more. I mean, agree with you more.
Agree, yeah, very good. Hey, brother, listen, I know 2-hour time zone difference can make a difference in how you talk sometimes, and there's less oxygen out there, so you're going to have to really think hard on part of our conversations probably. But let's get into it, Carlos. Hit and miss of the week. This is anybody who's our first-time listener knows that what we do is each and every week we give our hit or miss of the week, and what this is something that happened in the world of sports that disappointed us or uplifted us. And as always, the guest goes first. So what is your hit or miss of the week, Carlos?
My hit of the week is, and I think Moose Muhammad could probably talk to this if he was watching, but last night's game in Denver, where Denver's playing the Bears, 37's left in the game, and what happened in those 37 seconds till the end of the game was so many different things, and the drama was unbelievable for the fans, the players, the commentators, everything. Because it went everything from probably about 4 or 5 penalties. With 37 seconds left in the game, the Denver Broncos came back, and I don't know if you saw it, but they were in a position to do a 2-point conversion to basically go up 1 point.
Sure.
They got penalized, so they went back and decided to kick to tie it. Then the Bears had a penalty, so they brought it back to try the 2 point. They scored the 2 point. They go ahead by 2 points, and then, they go ahead by 1 point, and then the Bears come back with 37 seconds left. They get a 15-yard penalty on 4th, and I think it's 15. They complete the pass to get a first down.
Sure.
Basically, with 1 second left on the clock, and then take the timeout for the kicker to come out. He makes a 52-yard field goal, and they steal the game because Colorado fans thought the game was over.
Yep.
But the clock showed 1 second left, and the the Bears actually win that game, and it was amazing, the drama.
And so you could feel the depression occurring in. Were you out?
I was at the bar, and you could hear the air.
Yes.
Except for those few Bear fans that were there.
Oh, so, yeah, you know how I mentioned, there's actually, because you guys are about a mile high, right? There's a little over 5,000 feet there. And, there's clear differences. In fact, we study this in exercise physiology. We talk about it as part of that class and so forth. But there's less oxygen there. And my guess is, as they say, you could hear the oxygen come out of the room. And so you felt even more go out of the room when he nailed that kick.
Oh, it was unbelievable. It was beautiful. And very entertaining, and I'm really depressed for all those Denver fans.
Well, and also, though, it's the beauty of sport. Like, one of the things I would like to say in a game like that, even though it's gut-wrenching, and it's easy to say when you're not on the receiving end of that losing kick, but it's the joy of sport, right? It's why we are fans, because if you don't have that against you, you can't have that for you, right? In other words, you're going to lose some, you're going to win some. It's just the beauty of sport. There should always be jeopardy that you're going to lose that game. That's what's great about sport.
There's so many scripts. Denver has the former quarterback from the Ravens. They haven't really been very good. The Bears have second-year sort of rookie, and they haven't been very good. The kicker is a guy that made the team this year. He's one of the youngest kickers, and he makes two of the longest field goals that he's done in his career.
Awesome.
At such a dramatic moment. So there's a lot of storylines in it.
Oh, yeah, it's great. Well, that's good stuff. Yeah, it's just the beauty of sport, and it was actually enjoyable as anything, Carlos, because you were not emotionally involved in the sport, right, or in the game.
Oh, absolutely. Let's not talk about the Cowboys-Redskins game. I'm emotionally involved in that one.
Yeah, no, I understand that. And Chris can relate because Chris, our producer, Carlos, is a Redskins fan. So if you want, you can stay on the line and you guys can commiserate off the air. But yeah, no, I get that. Everybody who's a sports fan knows what it's like to lose a close game. Because and what I always say is, if you've never experienced that, you're not really a fan.
Oh yeah.
So especially when it's a big rivalry game.
Oh yeah, that's right. A big rivalry game like you guys lost yesterday against the Cowboys. Yeah, brutal.
We'll certainly commiserate offline.
So, okay, you had a hit. I'm going to have a miss, and mine's a little more general. I liked how specific yours was. Mine has to do with, in fact, a big boo with a capital B to sports, radio, and TV. And here's why. Carlos, is the baseball season 2 weeks from the playoffs? Yes, right?
Yes.
The basketball World Cup just finished this past weekend. We have golf tournaments every weekend. MLS, the Canadian football, all this stuff's going on. And it seems, and I watch plenty, obviously big sports fan myself, even in preparation for this show, I watch plenty and listen to plenty of sports radio. And I am disappointed, not necessarily shocked, not necessarily, I'm not even surprised, but it's just disappointing. Every year I forget how much the sports radio and TV people love the NFL. Talk about these other sports. Even Carlos, on Sunday morning, this is the day after college football, in which there are dozens of games, literally hundreds in Division 1, 2, and 3. And come 9 o'clock, they stop talking about that and they just start preparing for the NFL. I get that, but it's just during the week. It's just amazing to me. They don't spend more time talking about these other sports that are gearing up for the playoffs, soon gearing up for the World Series. Hockey season's about to start. Big basketball tournaments going on worldwide. And it's almost a refusal to talk about it. They just want to talk. They just want to talk about the NFL. And I know one of your passions is, and you're a fan of the United team there in D.C., is just talk about it sometimes. You don't have to talk about it a lot, just sometimes. And there's almost a refusal to do that, as if there's nobody at those United games, as if there's nobody at these baseball games. There's a million people at those games, either watching via TV or at the field, and they just keep shoving it to the side. And frankly, brother, I don't get it. And I'm wondering if you have a comment on that.
Well, I would agree with you, and there's been, at least in the D.C. market, some progress because we now have baseball in D.C., and so there's a big story around that. So the baseball team has been very good, too, so that has helped it. And then, again, the Capitals, with what they've done in the last couple of years, has helped it. But I've even heard personalities on the radio say, even though D.C. United had won on the weekend and all the other teams had lost, they won't even mention it. They'll say all the Washington teams lost, and when reference soccer, they would say, we don't cover soccer here. Like there are no soccer fans.
I know. Yeah, that in fact, there's truth in that, and they just literally forget that there's not just hundreds, but there are thousands, even tens of thousands of fans. And it always amazes me that some folks just refuse to do that. Well, listen, buddy.
Some statistics that soccer has now, the MLS has surpassed or is close to surpassing baseball in terms of number of fans and stadium attendance, which is amazing.
Oh, yeah. I don't doubt that at all. And all that stuff just points to the fact that it's just an NFL, based society, especially in towns like this where there's an NFL team. Yeah. But just remember, not only are there other people, but there are other teams in there that deserve the attention, right? So
absolutely.
All right, listen, brother, enjoy your conference out there in Colorado. Come back safe, and then we'll talk shortly after you get back, all right?
Great to be on. Thanks. Enjoy your show.
I appreciate it, buddy.
Have a good one.
See ya.
Bye-bye.
All right, folks, you're listening to Carolina Catholic Radio. This is Faith in Sport. I'm Dr. John Aquaviva. In fact, the show rundown at the beginning of the show, I mentioned that we were going to do weekend headlines before have our second guest on, Moose Muhammad. But I understand he's on the line right now, Chris? Yeah, he's going to be on the line. He's going to join the show just in a minute. And, folks, I just want to remind you and thank the folks at Brand RPM for their sponsorship. They are the ones who sponsor this show. Brand RPM, get your brand in gear. We have access to over 1 million products. and that is brandrpm.com. So thank you for Dave Anderson and the folks at Brand RPM, and in particular, they sponsor our last segment of the week, which is this week, the Catholic Quote of the Week. Chris, I understand Mr. Muhammad is on the line. Very good.
Yes.
Folks, let me introduce our next guest. This is the first time he's been on the show, but he is no stranger to these airwaves. He's had his own show here in the past. And in fact, if I'm not mistaken, he is going to be on actually later on one of the local sports stations. Let me introduce Moose Muhammad, 14 years in the NFL, and he has ventured out of the NFL world, and he's doing his own thing, and he's here to talk about some of those things. Moose Muhammad, welcome to the show.
John, thanks for having me.
This is awesome, brother. Now, listen, you retired after 14 years in the NFL, had a very productive career from the great state of Michigan, as although I thought, you and I could talk about this maybe off the air, but I thought you kind of picked the wrong university there, but we can talk. Because I think I mentioned to you I'm a big U of M fan. But, no, listen, thank you for joining us for the show. And one of the things our listeners want to know is, you retired in 2009. What have you been doing since 2009?
Wow. Well, quite a bit. I have 6 children.
Yep.
And so I do quite a bit of cultivating, the home front and chasing kids around.
Yep.
The U.S. quite a bit. But, that's been my main focus is, just family. And outside of that, I've started an investment business, and things have been going well with that.
Awesome.
And, that's about it, John. I think between business and family, I've got all I can handle on my plate.
Oh, no, I understand that. You have 6 kids. I have 4, and so that's like, 50% more kids than I do, so I can appreciate that. In fact, Moose, how many times have you heard, because we live in this culture where there's small families, right? There's 1 or 2. And I can't tell you how many times people have said to us when we had 3 and 4 kids, and they would say stuff like, how do you do it? And I always look at them, and most of the time I try to say in the friendliest voice possible, I say, there's a lot more people that have a lot more kids than us and are still getting it done.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think, the old way of doing things, traditionally was, the amount of children you had really were based on how much work you had. I mean, it was, farming and,
right.
Any kind of family business or lifestyle. And people just, had kids and were fruitful and multiplied. And, I didn't come from a necessarily, big family, but extended family was pretty big. I mean, I had an older sister and a younger brother, but and then we had a couple of other, sort of adopted siblings and extended family through foster care. And so, I think times have changed now quite a bit.
Yep.
And the big families are not as prevalent as they were in the past.
No, they're definitely not. But you're getting it done. We're getting it done. And, just to pass along, this always sends people to their knees. But my wife's 2 best friends, one is a mother of 8, the other one's a mother of 6, and so there's other people doing similar to what you guys are doing. And God bless you, brother, and congratulations on all the success that you've experienced, not only in your career but since then, which is probably as important to you and your family as any. But let's do this. Let's go back to the NFL, and I'm just curious because I know that you keep your finger on the pulse of the NFL and kind of what's going on, some of the characters in the game and ownership and so forth. But since you left the game, do you feel the NFL has changed? And if so, is it for the better, for the worse, or is it just it's changed, but it's not necessarily for the better or the worse?
Well, I'll tell you what, John, let's kind of put things in perspective here. I mean, when I retired from the NFL, let me just back up. When I was drafted to the NFL, I think it was the gross revenue for the NFL around that time was about $400 million.
And now?
And now we're well over $9 billion. And so you're talking about exponential growth. And even from the time that I retired, when we may have been somewhere around $3 or $4 billion, compared to now we're at $9 billion, a lot has changed.
Oh, yeah.
And in order for the NFL to grow in revenue, we're talking about not just TV games, but TV content, right?
Yep.
and digital content and everything in between. And so in order to fulfill those demands, consumer demands and grow this business, players are asked to do a lot of things differently than they did in the past. We didn't have, the internet was not as robust. Cell phones and, viewing opportunities, content opportunities were not as robust in my playing days. And so, like I said, players, coaches, NFL staffs are asked to do more in order to create this revenue. Now, the revenue is a good thing. I think player salaries are continuing to increase, coaches' salaries, team revenues, distribution to shareholders and team owners. All those things are growing. And so under Roger Goodell, he's done a great job of growing the NFL business. That also has downside to it, right?
Sure.
Because now the focus is not just on your play, but it's also about the aura that you can create around yourself, right? And so you're really getting to understand and know a lot about the players, probably a little bit more than we care to know. And that's strengths, weaknesses, flaws, interesting things, talents outside of the sport, et cetera. And we're getting to learn a lot more. Now, for that reason, I think that the NFL has exposed a lot of sort of dark side to some of these players, right? And some of the, shortcomings that some of these guys have. And I think that one of the bad sort of products of the growth of the NFL is the fact that, players are focusing more on what kind of image and aura they can create outside of football, and it's not necessarily good, right?
Moose, give me an example of that. What would be the dark side of this? Would the Antonio Brown situation fall into that category?
Yeah, I think so. I think that, for a guy like Antonio Brown, and, I hate to try to define him, but, he's created a whole life and, following outside of playing the game. Mm-hmm. And for better or worse, he's, as a part of the whole Twitter profile, and I'm not sure if your listeners understand how this works, but the more followers that you have, the more interactions that you have with fans, et cetera, will allow you to increase your Twitter following and status, and therefore, get contracts with some of these and endorsements with some of these companies that are out there, right? Yeah. And so guys are doing all types of things, to try to garner that type of attention to get those contracts and those endorsement deals.
Yep.
And, for a guy like, Antonio Brown, I think a lot of it is sort of blown up in his face. I think that, Pittsburgh Steelers did a great job of, just trying to contain and control, parts of that situation, and it blew up on them. And at a certain point, Antonio Brown had, so many followers, and his success on the field led to, to garner so much attention that now I think he believes that he's bigger than the game.
Oh, yeah.
And there's one statistic that holds true, is that 100% of all of us athletes, including you, John, because I know you were a good athlete back in the day, but we'll all retire one day.
That's right. Yep.
And the game will live on. And I'm not quite sure if some of these players realize that their true value and what people should be talking about is their play.
Yep.
It's not all the side antics and a lot of the things, the sideshows and things that are going on off the field. And as a matter of fact, in the case of Antonio Brown, it's really made him look quite selfish.
Right.
That he's willing to put himself in front of what is most important to the team, and chemistry with his players, his teammates, and et cetera. And I think that, it has exposed some flaws that otherwise may not have been exposed had there not been this whole outside platform outside of football. I think that specifically has changed for the worse with the game.
Yep.
And then there's other parts about the game, and just knowing the players that have changed as well. And John, and I guess sticking with the Antonio Brown issue here, right?
Yep.
Our media is is not innocent in creating this villain. He and you can look at Odell Beckham Jr. as well, right?
Yep.
That, there are great people to follow in this game. They may be boring, but they're great to follow. I mean, look at Julio Jones, and last night, his heroic efforts in order to, for Atlanta to, propel past Philadelphia Eagles last night.
Yeah.
If you look at a guy like that, you look at, guys like Larry Fitzgerald. There are a number of guys in the game right now that are worthy to be followed and are good guys, and I think should be role models for the youth today. Unfortunately, that's not what's popular, right? And I think that we have had a tendency to focus on the negative and the things that will drive headlines instead of the positive things that some of these players are doing out here.
Absolutely. Folks, you're listening to Carolina Catholic Radio. This is Faith in Sport. I'm Dr. John Acquaviva. Our special guest today is Moose Muhammad, 14-year NFLer, and all but 3 of those years were played here in Carolina for your Carolina Panthers. And we're talking football. We're talking other stuff that Moose has been doing since he retired from the game. Let me ask you, Moose, now it hasn't been all that long since you retired. Your body may feel it, but is there anything that you have found out, because like, for instance, your brother-in-law is a trainer. You must know a lot of people in the field of exercise and fitness and so forth. And, having met you, I know you still, put a lot of effort to keeping your body healthy and so forth. But is there anything that you wish you knew or that you know now that you wish you knew when you were a player about mental or physical preparation for the game?
Well, I'll tell you, my son is a high school athlete.
Yep.
Soon to be college athlete.
That's right.
He'll benefit from all the things that I've learned throughout my career and everything that I've been exposed to. I'd say number one, John, we had no idea what the effects of some of the supplements out there would be on our bodies. And one in particular is creatine, right? And back in the day, we were exposed to creatine. They hadn't done all the homework and science on it. That led to some muscle pulls that later, was one of the side effects. We found out was one of the side effects for creatine. And so, I wish we had more knowledge about substance and vitamins and things like that. We weren't exposed to the benefits of massage and flexibility. I learned that later on in my career. Mm-hmm. It wasn't until I was an NFL athlete that I really, really, really started focusing on, the different health benefits, flexibility, nutrition, and all those different things that the kids today have exposure to.
Absolutely.
And I think it may have prolonged my career. And I had a healthy career, John. I mean, I played 14 years, which is, like grandpa age for, NFL players.
Absolutely.
But had I been exposed to some of these things earlier, could I have played, 15 or 20 years? If the rules were a little bit different back in my day than they are today, would I have been able to play longer? I think so, right?
Yep.
The game is a lot safer today than it was when I played in my heyday.
It's interesting. I'm looking at your lifetime stats, your career stats, I should say. And what's interesting, in the latter half of your career, you actually averaged more games played and started than you did in your first half of your career. In both of them, the average is got to be 14 games that you played. And I'm wondering, is that part of what you're talking about? In other words, you started to learn more about flexibility and taking care of your body and the appropriate supplements to take and probably stuff about nutrition and so forth, or was it just coincidental?
Yeah, no, it's a direct relation. When I was in college, and I was, first of all, I only started 1 year of college football, right? And I was drafted in the second round.
Yeah.
And the mindset that I had back then was, man, I'd do anything, right, to have an opportunity to play in the NFL.
Yeah.
And so I was focused on how strong I could be, right? And I went to the combine, and I was one bench press off of the wide receiver record. I bench pressed 225 23 times.
Awesome.
I ran, my personal workout, I ran a 4.36 in the 40. I mean, I was a speed guy. I was a big guy, weighed 220 pounds.
Yeah.
And I was 6'3", and I could run a 4.4 consistently, right?
Yep.
And so I was taking supplements they're all legal supplements, but creatine and some of the other vitamins and stuff. I was focused on strength. And when I was, drafted into the NFL and maybe, a year or two into the NFL, a lot of those substances took a certain toll on me. I pulled my hamstring. I had one of the worst hamstring injuries in my second year in the NFL. My first year in the NFL, I think I broke my wrist. And so my first 2 or 3 years, I battled injuries and really was just trying to find my way, right? Yeah. And I think, some of these supplements may have had something to do with that. But I also found out after entering into the NFL, I didn't need to be that big. Sure. I didn't need to be that fast. And I sort of reinvented myself and resculptured my body to get a little leaner. I came down under 215 pounds. I lost about 6 or 7 pounds. I leaned up. I stopped hitting the weights, and I started working on, more flexibility, more strength through movement, plyometrics, a lot of different things that I learned about after college, right? Yep. And because of the focus on my body, I went, another 12 years without an injury, without a significant injury anyway. And I only had 2 surgeries my whole NFL career, and they were in the first 3 years of my career.
Interesting.
And so I literally had 12 years of no surgeries. I might have missed some games, but they may have been more strategic. Team wanted, we made the playoffs or something. The team didn't want to play me that week, or, there were different reasons that I didn't play in every single game in my latter part of my career, but I was healthy.
Sure.
And I think that was the key takeaway is I really found my rhythm. I reinvented myself, and I was able to sustain a long career because of that.
It's awesome. Folks, you're listening to Faith in Sport. We're talking to former NFL wide receiver, mainly for the Carolina Panthers, Moose Muhammad. Moose, I know you got another appearance on a radio show here in a few minutes, but let's end with this. And this is going to be something that especially, I think, resonates with our Catholic audience, because adoption is such a big thing within the Catholic world, pro-life, and if you can't raise the kid yourself, the church always asks that people put the baby up for adoption. And you're a part of what's known as the Gift of Adoption of the Carolinas. Tell us about it briefly and what drew you in to be a part of this organization.
Well, I was approached by a couple of the founding board members when they wanted to launch the chapter in the Carolinas.
Sure.
And at that time, my wife and I had recently, successfully completed an adoption, and that was back in 2007.
Okay.
And so at the time, we adopted a sibling group from international, from Ethiopia.
Yep.
A brother and sister that were 4 and 7 at the time.
Awesome.
And so the focus on Gift of Adoption, and let me add this caveat as well, that the other founding board members had also either been involved with adoption, either they adopted children, or they themselves were adopted.
Awesome.
And so there was some relationship to adoption that everyone had this sort of vested interest that were involved or wanted to be involved with launching this chapter in the Carolinas. And the focus, John, was to be able to provide financing for families who really wanted to, add an addition to their family.
Yep.
Either they couldn't have children biologically, or they wanted to just add more children and, more love in their family. So, we wanted to provide, we didn't want finances to stand in the way of both, parents and families that wanted children or children that needed families. And so, if the finance was a barrier or an obstacle, we wanted to remove that. Awesome. And so that was the focus. We, raised, quite a bit of money through either fundraising efforts and different ventures And then we were able to provide grants to different applicants that would tell us their story, write in, tell us their stories, and then ask for financial aid. So that was the focus. The board has continued to grow. It's a great charity, and if anyone is out there that has thought about adoption, if you're considering adoption, and the hurdle has been, man, it costs too much, or whatever the finance may be. Go to our website. It's giftofadoption.org, and it's the Carolina chapter. And I would say to go ahead and submit a request for a grant, and most of our grants are approved.
We'd love to hear that. Boy, thank you. I owe you thank you for a few things. First of all, for coming on the show, for being a part of the Gift of Adoption, because that's a really important part of our community life. And thank you for saying yes to those 2 kids from Ethiopia, because their lives, of course, are changed forever, and I know it's changed your life forever. And thank you for your role as a family man, and I know that you're a good role model to those around you. And thanks again for coming on the show. And I hope that if I give another invite, you can come back on and we can have another conversation, Moose.
Absolutely, John. Thanks for having me on, and we'd love to come back on again.
I appreciate it. You take care.
Okay, take care.
There you go. Folks, that's Moose Muhammad, former NFL wide receiver, mainly for your Carolina Panthers. He played 3 years with the Chicago Bears, but actually came back for the last couple of years of his life. How was that, Chris? Was that guy great?
Yeah, that was awesome.
That was really good. And talk about the real deal, right?
Right.
This guy's living the life as a family guy. He's gotten himself involved in a business, which my guess is going to be is pretty successful. And this organization he belongs to, the Gift of Adoption. I don't know if you know this, Chris. In fact, I never knew this, that it may cost up to $40,000 or $50,000 for you to adopt a kid from another country. In fact, including in this country. And that's one of the things they do. They raise money so you don't have that burden, at least not all of that burden. Think about that, one child. And think of how many people have to say no to that because they don't have near the money to do that.
Right.
And thankfully, he had the means, but also him providing his name to that organization is huge, right? Because not only I love that. He said that virtually everybody on the board is either adopted themselves or they have an adopted kid. And him being on that board, you can bet $1 million whenever somebody like that, somebody of his character and his fame, joins an organization like that, that it's going to bring more notoriety and probably greater funds to that.
Right.
I thought that was terrific.
Yeah.
So, folks, I'm Dr. John Acquaviva. I'm an exercise physiologist at Wingate University. You're listening to Carolina Catholic Radio. The show is Faith in Sport. And, boy, that was a perfect example of the guest we like to have on this program, Moose Muhammad, former NFL wide receiver. By the way, if you're just not quite sure of how successful he was, it's said in really 2 things, but the primary thing is that he played so long. He played in the NFL for 14 years. And at least 1 year, he led the NFL in TDs, in yards, and yards per game. Not actually all the same year. He had some productive years in there. And he, as he mentioned, he worked hard to get to where he was. By the way, he mentions creatine a few times in there. By the way, it's a legal supplement that you can get from GNC or over the internet, and it's naturally occurring in our body, but it helps the muscle contract for a longer period of time when we're under duress, like high intense activities. And it's never been illegal either at the NCAA level, at the high school level, or the pro level. And one of the things he said was, although the research said that it is safe, he said it led to some injuries, or at least he believed it did. So I just wanted to clarify that. We talk about that all the time in our classes, supplements, and in particular creatine. All right, let's do this. Chris, you got to get ready to shoot some questions at me, but first I want to do the weekend headlines. We'll talk about that, and then we'll come back to these questions. So let's talk about some things that happened in the last few days in the world of sport. Major League Baseball, there's only 2 weeks that remain until the playoffs. And the amazing thing is the Yankees remain at the top of the power rankings. Like MLB.com will rank those teams. But if you ask me, the 2 best teams are the Astros and the Dodgers. But ironically, I shouldn't say ironically, but the interesting thing is the Yanks have a better record. And watch out for a good team versus a power team. In other words, you can have all the stars on there, but if there's a team that just wins with the guys they have, watch out for them. And one of the things that makes the Yanks so impressive, Chris, is that they've had, I think, more injuries than any other team in Major League Baseball. And they're at the top of that.
Yeah, one of the things I really hope to see
is
for the World Series is it to come down to the Braves and the Yankees. I think that'd be awesome because the Braves, they've locked in their spot into the playoffs now.
Oh, that's why no, I mean this. That's why the Braves are a dangerous team.
Yeah.
They win a lot, but they just have a good team.
Mm-hmm.
They have some really good players, but they don't have that one or two big superstars. And the irony is the Yanks normally have that. And they still have their good players, but they're just winning with the guys they have. And some of them are no-name guys.
Right.
It's impressive. So, yeah, I'll root along with you. I have nothing against Atlanta. And before we went on the air, I was mentioning that the manager, Brian Snitker, may very well come on this show as a guest.
That'd be awesome.
And so if he does, I'll become even a bigger Braves fan. So that's what's going on in Major League Baseball and college football. We just completed Week 3. A few of the top 25 teams tumbled. Like, for instance, Michigan State University lost to unranked Arizona State. Clemson and Alabama rolled. I think as these weeks go on, I think they're going to separate themselves as the top two teams. But you never know. It's just one of the issues with Clemson, though, is they're not playing anybody. They thought this past weekend against Syracuse was going to be one of their tougher games. And everybody agreed that Clemson didn't play real well, and they beat them by 40 points. They crushed them. Anyway, so... in the NFL, let's switch gears to another form of football. Week 2 is just completed. I think the Patriots look real good. The Cowboys, Packers look real good. But the Steelers and the Panthers are 0-2. Now, I'm going to mention the Panthers. I heard a sports commentary on the Panthers. And basically, it was a commentary, but he was really just pleading with the faithful of the Carolina Panthers. He was like, don't give up. Only 0-2. Don't listen to the stats. But the stats are resounding, Chris. If I'm not mistaken, only one team in the last 15 years or more, after starting 0-2, made it to the playoffs. In other words, Carolina Panther fans, be worried.
Yeah. I'm sure they're wishing they could have a guy like Moose back on the team
again.
Yeah,
they would love somebody like him. They actually have some decent wide receivers. They have a good personnel, but the big thing is not only they're 0-2, but they lost to those 2 games at home. So that means of their 14 remaining games, 8 of them are away. And that's always a tough thing. In fact, you guys may or may not know this, our listeners, but of all the major sports teams, hockey, basketball, baseball, and football, the one that has the greatest home field advantage is football. In other words, if you think your team's going to win, hope that they're at home, and then the chances are going to go up a great deal. The Steelers, man, they're looking bad too. I just read just before we went on, Ben Roethlisberger's out for the year.
Wow.
Yeah, so they have the uphill climb to go. So Panther fans, don't feel so bad. Steeler fans are right in that same boat as you. The other thing I wanted to report on was...
I don't feel so bad about my Redskins either.
No, I know. I didn't want to mention that because we were talking about that off air, but the Redskins are also 0-2. But Chris, of course, that doesn't, that thing about not making the playoffs, that doesn't appeal to teams around the District of Columbia. So
okay.
It's only for the teams outside of the national capital, the nation's capital. The last thing I want to report as far as the weekend headlines is World Cup basketball. The USA team, I reported, lost a game that was, I think, a little bit of a surprise, but they lost the second time this past week to France. They did not play in the championship game, but the biggest thing was they not only not played in the championship game, Chris, they played for 7th place against Poland.
Wow.
So needless to say, we're going to talk about this a little more in our Q&A, but there was a big shocker to people, but I'll kind of put that in perspective. So, folks, listen, before we move on to our next segment, the quick Q&A with Dr. A, I want to do a couple things. First of all, remind folks, if they're listening on their car radio, that you can pass the word around, or you have the option to go to the App Store, go to Carolina Catholic Radio Network, and then download the app and just hit Listen Now. Or you can go to carolinacatholicradio.org and do the same thing. Just go to our website, and right at the top it says Listen Live. Just tap on that. So there's 3 different ways to tap into our show. But the other thing is if you know somebody, especially in the area, that is a coach, an administrator, even a referee, or an athlete that you think has been exceptional, that just stands for character, morality, as well as a good sportsman, sportswoman, let me know about them. So write me at faithandsport@wingate.edu. You can email me and say, Doc, I think you should have this guest on. Or if there's something you want me to talk about, if there's something going on in the world of sport, like that was a great thing that Moose gave us some insight on, Chris, wasn't it? Like the whole thing about the social media that these guys make money through that. And so therefore, rather than working on their game, Chris, they're working on their social media skill. Right. And you can bet some of them spend hours and hours and hours doing that. And he's ultimately saying, not only does it worsen the game because they're not as good as athlete, but the focus is on something that has virtually nothing to do with the game. It's just, I don't know. What's that word? I'm missing the word right now, but they're just worried about how they look. What's the word I'm looking for, Chris? Anyway, everybody right now is going, this is the word, Doc. I can't believe a PhD forgot that. Anyway, the other way to get in touch with me is j.aquaviva1. So j.aquaviva1, you can tweet me there. But not only if you have somebody that you'd like to be a guest on the show, as I mentioned, something that you want to hear us talk about, right? So I always think that's interesting. So we got a few minutes left in the show, Chris. Let's move on to the quick Q&A with Dr. Ray. What's your first question?
Well, first, we need to remind the listeners about our T-shirt giveaway today.
That's
we
right.
got a really nice Wingate University golf T-shirt we're trying to give away to a lucky listener.
That's right.
Listening to the show today.
Very good. So let's do this. The first person to call in, we got about 12 minutes left before we sign off, or
right.
you can simply write me at that email address, faithandsport. All you have to do is do a little bit of research and tell me, or Chris, what was one of the universities or colleges that I earned one of my degrees at. So I have a master's degree, I have a PhD, and it all started out with a bachelor's degree. Mm-hmm. So if you can do some basic research and find out any one of those universities or colleges, shoot it at Chris or shoot at me. Just give me your address and I'll send you this cool Wingate golf T-shirt. How's that?
Awesome.
That's pretty cool. We'll do it again in the future. In fact, I got a couple more, so let's see how this goes today.
Yeah, it's a very stylish T-shirt.
That's right. People are going to be going, you're the man or woman when you wear that. All right, let's move on to quick Q&A. Chris, what's your first question?
First up, the California passed a bill to allow the state's college athletes to sign an agent and accept endorsement deals. Is this progress in the fight to pay college athletes? What's your opinion on that?
Yeah, this is a big issue, right? Whether we should pay college athletes or not. I think this is definitely progress for the people who want and have wanted people to get paid for years, no doubt about it. I think they feel it'd be a concession because ultimately the big fight is just pay them, give them a salary. Like anything, I've heard anything from $2,000 a year to $10,000 a year just for being an athlete here at our school. But they think it's a concession. I think they think the NCAA will ultimately accept it. Couple things about this. Well, first of all, the reason that it's a concession is that there'd be no payment. It's that the payments would not come from the school itself. It would come from endorsements, right? Everybody from a superstore to some type of beverage could endorse that athlete, and they could sign a contract, and they could earn money that way and still be a student athlete, right? Mm-hmm. There's a couple issues here, though. One is that it's just for the state of California. Second of all, the governor has to sign it for it to become a bill. And even if they do, the NCAA, no matter what state you're from, they have to okay it. So in other words, you can't be, if you're going to be a student athlete under the NCAA's guidelines, you can't accept these endorsement deals. So the talk is, Chris, they are going to split. That it's almost like the state of California is going to just go out into the ocean and they're going to be independent and they're going to have their own little system. Of course, the reason it's not going to be good is UCLA, USC, California, all those teams there, that means they're not going to be able to play outside of they're going to be special professional athletes. They're not going to be part of the NCAA. That's going to be a huge deal.
Yeah.
And those schools have to break away from the NCAA. And remember, the NCAA brings them a lot of money for bowl games and especially for the tournament in March. So I don't see that happening. It's going to create an uneven playing field. But I think that's where we're headed, and I think it's quite possible that they will do it. I think ultimately, unless the NCAA agrees that it's okay, I don't see those schools actually doing it. Remember, just the bill being signed allows them to do it, doesn't necessarily mean they're going to do that. A whole lot more to be said about this,
right?
But I want to just want to use just a little bit of time for each question. Question number 2.
Yep, this next question, we're going to shift gears and go back to Major League Baseball. Yeah. And I just want to ask you, what's with the Boston Red Sox firing General Manager Dave Dombrowski?
Yeah, Dombrowski. This was a huge thing. In fact, I was shocked. I was downright shocked. Now listen to this, Chris. He has been there for 3 years, 3.5 years. The first 3 years, the first 2, he won division titles. His third year, 2018, they won the World Series. And this year, because they were, at the time, I think they're around 8 or 9 games above 500. I think they're double digits behind the New York Yankees, right? But they fired him. In fact, there was no controversy. Like normally when people get fired, there's some story going around of, inappropriate actions with women, or he said something that was inappropriate about one of their players, or he just did something that was bad or immoral or maybe even illegal. None of that stuff came out. I think this is ultimately an old school move. In other words, he is not of the world of analytics. And analytics, for those who don't know baseball and that term, it has to do with just using stats to make every decision. So here's an example. Folks, if you've ever watched a baseball game in the last 5 years, they have what's called the shift, right? A left-handed or right-handed batter will come up, and rather than having 2 infielders per side of second base, they will shift one of the players over so there's 3 on one side, 1 on the other. And the reason they do that is because statistically, it says most of the time, not all the time, but most of the time, they're going to hit to that side of the infield, right? That's why they do it. And that's analytics. They're just like, 62% of the time, they hit it to that side of the infield. But it's not saying 100%, and that's why some people go, I don't care what the stats say, I'm not doing that. And Dave Dabrowski was in the latter. He was maybe an analytics guy to an extent, but I'm wondering, is that why they fired him? This confuses me, but here's the reason that it frustrates me so much. It just shows no patience. Here's a guy who won the World Series not just 2 years ago or 3 years ago, Chris, but just last year. And here they are in third place. 13, 14 games out of first place, whatever they were. And they're like, we're done with you. And before this guy was a winner. He took the Tigers to 2 World Series. He was with Detroit a couple years before that. He helped the Miami Marlins go to the World Series and win that. He was the guy behind those teams. You're fired. You're not doing well for us today. It's just one more example of what have you done for me today? And it's frustrating. Right. All right. So listen, we don't have time for that third question. We can always carry it over to next week, though, right?
Yes,
okay.
Right.
All right. So let's do this. Let's move on to our quote of the week. And there's a couple things I want to say about this quote. But before we do that, I want to, again, thank, as I did in the very beginning of the show, the sponsor for this show, and that is Brand RPM. Brand RPM, from pens to polos, right here in Charlotte. Swag up and do so at brandrpm.org. And that is our sponsor for our quote of the week. In fact, it's our Catholic quote of the week. This comes from St. John Paul II, right? From 78 to 2005, he was our beloved Pope. And this is what he said about sport. Quote, "Sport is an activity that involves more than the movement of the body. It demands the use of intelligence and the disciplining of the will. It reveals, in other words, the wonderful structure of the human person created by God as a spiritual being, a unity of body and spirit." End quote. Again, that's from St. John Paul II. Recently speaking, no one in the church has talked more about the unity of body and spirit. He was great. He talked about that we were embodied for a reason. He talked about this concept known as theology of the body, which is famous in a lot of circles within the Catholic Church. But he, as a former athlete himself, he seemed to fully recognize the body as a gift, especially in sport, since few things in our daily life have integrated these two entities better than that. In other words, he thought, look at this masterpiece of God. God has created this masterpiece, this wonderful structure, this wonderful machine that can do all these wonderful things on the field. But his point also is it's a disciplining of the will to work hard within the game, to work hard for the game, to practice, to understand what's going on from the coach, to be coachable. And this integration of mind, body, and spirit, he fully recognized, and he wanted those fans of sport to do the same thing. And I just loved the way he always did that and the way he always brought that together. So that's our quote of the week from St. John Paul II. By the way, if you ever want to read what the beloved popes have said about just in the last 100 years, they have literally not just hundreds, but probably close to 1,000 different quotes on the importance of sport in our society, but what our faith as a Christian means to those involved in sport. Just look it up. All you have to do is put in quotes from the Pope or Pope quotes on sport or athletes, and they've just said a lot of wonderful stuff about that. Again, this segment, Catholic Quote of the Week, is brought to us by Brand RPM. Are you ready to swag up? Let Brand RPM outfit your company, and do so at brandrpm.org. All right, so folks, pass along this show. Remember, rebroadcasts, Chris, are going to be at Saturday?
Saturday afternoon from 4 to 5, and Sunday afternoon from 2 to 3. You can hear an encore presentation of this show, Faith and Sport, this weekend on Carolina Catholic Radio, AM 1270 WCGC, and also at carolinacatholicradio.org, and also on the Carolina Catholic Radio app. So you got 3 ways to hear Faith and Sport. So make sure you take advantage of at least one of them and listen to the show.
Absolutely, and pass it along to others. And as our current Pope Francis said, in sport as in life, competing for the result is important, but playing well and fairly is even more important. Before we go, I want to special thank you to our producer, Chris Pressler. Our first guest today was Carlos Herrera. And then, of course, our second guest, and we spent a little more time with him on the phone, was Muhsin Muhammad. So thank you, all you guys, for everything that you've done to make this show good today. I'm Dr. John Aquaviva. Please join us next time here on Carolina Catholic Radio for Faith and Sport.
That's right. We also want to send out a special thank you to the man who makes this all possible, Mr. David Papandrea. Thank you, Mr. Papandrea, for making Carolina Catholic Radio possible and Faith and Sport here on the Carolina Catholic Radio Network. And again, make sure to tune in this Saturday for an encore presentation of this show, Saturday afternoon from 4 to 5, and Sunday afternoon from 2 to 3. It's Faith and Sport here on Carolina Catholic Radio with your host, Dr. John Aquaviva. We'll be back live with you in the studio next Monday afternoon from 2 to 3 for a brand new show, Faith and Sport, here on Carolina Catholic Radio, AM 1270. Also broadcasting and streaming on carolinacatholicradio.org and the Carolina Catholic Radio app. Thanks for tuning in, everybody.
We hope you enjoyed the program and will join us back for another show on WCAT Radio. This is Sebastian Mahfood. Good day.